This video is sponsored by SIDEQUEST Annual 3. In Monday's video, we looked at the history of D&D 5th edition and how it was able to piggyback off of a perfect moment in time where the culture seemed primed to get interested in D&D more than it ever had been before. In yesterday's video, we talked about how I think it is unlikely that D&D is going to be able to repeat that success for their new edition, because D&D's publishers, Wizards of the Coast and Hasbro, can't seem to stop being their own worst enemies. However, I am, at my heart, an optimist, and although I don't have any trust for Hasbro, the corporation in charge of the direction D&D goes, that's hardly unique. I generally don't trust any corporations, especially publicly traded companies who have to answer to shareholders. They don't have the customer's best interest at heart because they legally can't. They're too busy chasing the almighty dollar. And despite all of Wizards of the Coast's obvious flaws, I am still very keen to see what happens with the game itself. I like D&D 5e a lot. I don't always agree with the choices the designers make, either in terms of the design or the products they put out, but I also think that their choices are interesting and tell us a lot about how they think of the game they're making. And if we can understand what's going through their heads, then that can help us handle the friction that comes up when we try to convert their game to our playstyle. Plus, I love introducing this game and this hobby to new people, and I love taking a look at each product and seeing how it might help or hurt the process of new players and new game masters entering the hobby. And for this new edition, I'm planning on running all the new products for my groups. I've wanted to run more published adventures, but instead I usually focus on writing my own adventures for my games, and that often just winds up taking so much of my energy and my time, but over the next couple of years, I'm planning to run a lot less homebrew and a lot more published material. And so I'm going to be really interested in picking up each of these products and reviewing them and taking them for a spin because I want to see how they can make my games easier and more fun to run. And that'll give me a chance to essentially put myself in the shoes of a lot of other GMs who don't write their own adventures, especially new game masters who have never run a published adventure before. And of course, I have a weird completionist streak. Someday I would really like to have a physical copy of every product that came out for a given edition. That was not the case for the 2014 edition, but maybe this time I can better justify picking up all these books since I have a platform to discuss them now, and a plan to use them in my games. Plus, now these books are a tax write-off, so I do expect to pick up each of these new products and talk about them on the channel. So today we're going to take a look at the announcements made in Wizards of the Coast's D&D Direct video at the end of August. We're going to see what we can learn about the products that they announced, and we'll discuss what they might mean for the future of this hobby. But before we begin, make sure to subscribe to the channel. We are so close to hitting 50,000 subscribers, which is absolutely incredible, and it would be amazing to try to hit that goal by the end of the year. So thank you so much. I hope we can make that happen because that would be fantastic. Now on with the show. First, at the start of the video, they discussed the new core rulebooks, but we don't have a lot to say here. They touched on some details about the player's handbook, but they released this video a few weeks ago. The player's handbook is out now, so I don't have to sit and watch this video and wonder whether or not I'm going to like the changes they're describing. I've got my own copy now. I can read the book and figure out if I like those changes. I'm running a game pretty soon. It should have actually already happened by the time you're watching this video. So I am going to make some videos about my thoughts on the new player's handbook and my thoughts on the new rules, but until I do, there's not much to say about the talking points presented in the D&D Direct video. We'll talk about the changes when I document my own experiences with it. I know a lot of my colleagues have already gotten their player's handbook videos out like a month ago, but hopefully I'll get my player's handbook videos uploaded before the Dungeon Master's Guide comes out. Speaking of which, they go on to discuss the Dungeon Master's Guide, which is coming in November, but this section is super short. They don't even really discuss all the things that we already know are going to be in the book, so there's not much news here. But I think that's because we know we're about to get a bunch more videos on the official D&D YouTube channel talking about the new Dungeon Master's Guide in a lot more detail. So they probably wanted to focus on the more newsworthy stuff today. But today, I mean in August when this video came out. So they didn't really go into super detail in the Dungeon Master's Guide. They mentioned it, because it'd be weird if they didn't, but they didn't do much more than that. Likewise, they super briefly talk about the monster manual and how we're going to get a lot more monsters and how great the art is going to be and how the monster entries will give you a lot of inspiration for your own adventures and campaigns. And that's not a lot of detail, but, you know, that all does sound great. I'm really looking forward to getting that book in February to see if the book actually accomplishes everything it's setting out to do. And then they move on to the new stuff that had not been announced yet, which is really what we're here to talk about today. And the first announcement is an anthology about dragons.
The Dragon Anthology book will be the first anthology and adventure book for the new 2024 rules.
This anthology is all about dragons in dungeons, and it's kind of surprising how many people say that they've actually never fought a dragon in D&D.
It is a book of 10 short adventures that all feature dragons in dungeons.
Interesting that this product is being announced without a name. That's actually true for all these books we're going to talk about today. I don't think I've ever seen them do that before. Interesting. I don't really know what to make of that. But this announcement for this book is where things get really fascinating to me, because let's look back at the beginning of 5th edition in 2014. The first product to be released was the starter set, which contained the adventure Lost Mine of Phandelver. Then the player's handbook came out a month later, the same day as their first adventure, Hoard of the Dragon Queen, which took you from about levels 1 to 10. Lost Mine to Phandelver features a brief encounter with the dragon, that's one on the cover there, but it's not the finale of the adventure. Hoard of the Dragon Queen is all about dragons, but outside of an encounter in the prologue where you do face a dragon, but you're not able to slay it because you're too low level, in this module, spoilers ahead, but you don't actually face a dragon in an actual fight until the end of the book. In order to get to that dragon fight, you have to, play through one of the most poorly reviewed adventures published for D&D 5e. Part of the reason it was the most poorly reviewed is because it was the most reviewed adventure, at least one of them, because it was the only adventure available outside of the starter set when the Player's Handbook first came out, so a lot of groups started with it. But I've tried to run it twice, and the first time it fizzled out, and the second time it ended in a TPK, and from what I understand, a lot of groups did not make it through this adventure, because it's pretty poorly put together. So there is a strong possibility that this time around the designers wanted to present a dragon-centric adventure early in the edition, so new players would actually get the experience of fighting a dragon. Because it's extremely possible that a lot of the people who played through Hoard of the Dragon Queen never actually played through it. They never got far enough to have the experience of fighting and killing a dragon. So I think it makes perfect sense to offer some adventures early on in this new edition to help give players that full dragon slaying experience, especially if you're hoping to recruit new players. I do think it's a little bit strange that we don't have any adventures coming out for this edition until next summer, which could be anywhere from 6 to 9 months after the Player's Handbook came out. But again, this is an edition that's theoretically compatible with the other adventures they published over the past 10 years, so I can understand there might be less of a rush for them to produce new adventures for this edition. It's also possible that they didn't want to distract themselves from these 3 core rulebooks and wanted to get these books right, and then put a lot more energy into the adventures that they want to print. It's a shame they don't have more staff members so they could work on more of these projects at once. I wonder why so many fewer people work at Wizards of the Coast than worked there this time last year. Probably a mystery that we'll never learn the answer to. But I also think it's really interesting that this is not a single mega adventure along the lines of most of the adventures Wizards of the Coast has been publishing over the past decade. I wonder if they did that specifically so players who are already playing through their 5th edition campaigns can more easily add one of these adventures into their games without jumping into a brand new mega adventure. After all, plenty of people are currently playing through campaigns and don't plan to switch halfway through. That's why Wizards of the Coast ran into all that trouble with D&D Beyond last month. But some people are still going to start new campaigns as soon as they get their Player's Handbook, or at the very latest, once the Game Master gets their hands on the Monster Manual in February. And they'll either run their own homebrew, or they're going to run pre-written campaigns. But that's going to be more feasible this time around than it would have been when 5th edition came out. It would have been extremely difficult to jump right into 5th edition with a published adventure from a previous edition, especially when you didn't know yet how the new version of the game worked and how it differed from previous editions of the game. Trying to run 5e with a 4e adventure would have been a real challenge in 2014 when we were all just trying to get our bearings on the new system. But for the most part, transitioning from 2014 to 2024 D&D should be a much smoother experience. There's still going to be some friction with the new monster stat blocks, and I'm sure other elements are going to be a little bit wonky as we get used to the changes, but the differences between these two editions won't be anywhere near as radical as the jump from 4th to 5th was. So, since so many groups will probably start new campaigns either right now or in February when they get the new monster manual, putting out a new mega adventure book a few months after that isn't necessarily going to be appealing to a lot of those groups. They won't be shopping for a new adventure anymore, their games will already be underway. But by making this book a series of independent dragon side quests, suddenly we'll have a product that you can more easily visualize incorporating into an ongoing game. Especially if they decide to focus on content for the early levels of the game, where you can fight dragons at lower levels rather than exclusively releasing 10 adventures for like 15th to 20th level, which we don't know for sure that's what they're doing, but looking at Wizards of the Coast publication history for 5th edition, I would guess that at least half of these adventures will be designed for a group of characters that's level 10 or lower. But the fact that the first adventure book being published for 5th edition, 2024, whatever we're calling it, is not one of these massive adventures that's supposed to take you from level 1 to 10, 1 to 15, 1 to 20, and instead an anthology of adventures, that strikes me as really fascinating. Because this is a bit of a spoiler alert for the rest of this video, but nowhere in 2025 are we getting another mega adventure. Instead, the focus is on more manageable chunks of content that can be incorporated into your existing game. I'm certain you could structure a full campaign around these 10 dragon adventures, just like you could build a campaign out of the adventures in Tales from the Yawning Portal. In fact, hopefully this book will give you more guidance than that one did. But this still feels like a really good step to me. I'm reminded of a recent Matt Colville video where he discusses the ideal length of an adventure. Obviously, given the amount of time each of these new products would have been in development, there's literally no chance this book was not already in the works when that video was released. But if I'm Matt Colville, I'd imagine I'd be smiling to myself right now, nodding at this announced book of adventures and saying, yeah, this is more along the lines of what we should be getting. This is a better way to introduce new people into the hobby. Now, one of the designers interviewed about this book was James Wyatt, who's probably best known for his work on the Dragonomicon, a whole book of dragons for a 3rd edition. So if he's working on this book, then I would imagine these dragon adventures are in good hands. One of the other benefits of an anthology book is that it opens up the opportunity for a lot more writers to contribute adventures. Candlekeep Mysteries and Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel were both huge books full of short adventures, and I believe most of those were written by freelancers. And so anytime the publishers need a bunch of short, self-contained adventures rather than one sweeping, interconnected mega campaign, it's potentially another opportunity for more writers to be brought into the fold to contribute. And that's probably especially true considering the core D&D team has probably been tied up working on these 3 core rulebooks. I wouldn't be surprised if at least a few members of the D&D team wrote adventures for this book, but it also would not at all surprise me if most of them didn't have the time to do that, so they would have instead reached out to writers who were not already on the Wizards of the Coast payroll. So I'm going to be very curious to see who wrote these dragon adventures, and I'm excited about that. So that's the first published adventure book for D&D 2024, coming in summer 2025. Don't think about it too hard. But then in fall of 2025, about a year from now, we're getting our next starter set.
We have an amazing new starter set that we are creating. We really lean into using components to teach people how to play.
I'm always fascinated by playing with new players. So the first time that a group sees a beholder and doesn't know how many eyes it has or what they do, it's going to be an epic moment for them. For the context of this box, it's in a place called the Borderlands, and it takes the players to kind of these 3 settings. There's the keep on the Borderlands, there's the wilderness itself, and then there is the Caves of Chaos. It sets them forth on this, this awesome journey that they can have for years and years and years, and hopefully bring that starter experience to someone else down the line.
So first of all, it's kind of super weird that we aren't getting a starter set until a full year after this version of the game has already been out. But once again, I think this is one of the weird moments of friction owed to the fact that this is not really a new edition, but something in between a revision and a brand new edition. So again, the team probably isn't super worried about the players who pick up these 3 core rulebooks being able to find another adventure right away. There's a starter set that's still out right now on shelves, especially in stores like Target, and so new groups could pick that up and run that adventure. Except, of course, the character sheets provided in that box will not be the 2024 characters, and the monsters in that box will also not be 2024 monsters, and the basic rules in that box set will not be the 2024 rules. So yeah, actually I stand by the fact that this is a weird choice. Again, maybe the issue is that they would rather get these dragon adventures out first, so people who are playing through an ongoing campaign can start using published material right away, and so they can sell another hardcover book right off the bat. But then again, I imagine the starter sets sell pretty well as well. They're a great way to get people into the game, and there isn't going to be one that's compatible with 2024 D&D for the first full year of its release. So yeah, the timing of this product is still really weird to me. Again, it's possible they're trying to pace themselves, either so they don't burn out or to help gas up the next fiscal quarter with a starter set. But it's also possible that those layoffs meant they can't get a starter set out any earlier than next year. But that being said, I am really interested in what we've learned about this set so far. I'm curious about the components aspect of it. That could mean a lot of things. The Essentials kit included cards to track initiative and statuses, cards for sidekicks, things like that. So it could be that simple. Or the set could include different colored dice, color-coded to the different elements of your character sheet, like the Pathfinder Beginner box does. Or maybe it'll have tokens and fold-out maps of dungeons. We don't know yet. And honestly, that's the part that I'm less interested in speculating about. Because I'd much rather discuss the adventure that's going to be included in this set. Because it's set in the Borderlands, which is famously the setting of Keep on the Borderlands, the adventure that was featured in D&D's basic set in 1979, and has been re-released many times since. Goodman Games has adapted the adventure in a hardcover book that people really love. It includes the original adventure, a 5e conversion, and a lot of notes from designers explaining the thought process behind the decisions made. I haven't had a chance to run that version of the adventure, but I did recently run the PDF of just the Caves of Chaos, which is the main dungeon equivalent of the adventure. Well, I say recently, it was probably definitely more than a year ago. It was before the pregnancy. Jeez, how long ago was that? Anyway, it doesn't matter. That PDF was an adaptation for D&D Next, the playtest for the rule set that became 5th edition, so it was essentially 5e compatible. But I'm going to be really interested to see how the full adventure is going to be adapted. The D&D Next version didn't include any of the content from the original adventure surrounding the Keep or the Journey to the Caves. It sounds like those are both getting their own packets in the starter set. But something else really interesting about the Caves of Chaos and the Keep on the Borderlands overall is that none of the NPCs have names. From what I understand, this was a deliberate choice on the part of Gary Gygax. The goal is to give the new Dungeon Master more experience creating details, so it's on them to come up with the names. Regardless of whether or not that was actually the goal, that was actually perfect for me. I don't tend to need a lot of help coming up with names. I also hate a lot of the names in modern published adventures. So I was perfectly happy opening a PDF and working with the established characters and motivations and factions presented, and just coming up with my own names. That version of the adventure gave me enough information to run a game that I was really happy with. That being said, I would be very surprised if the new starter set doesn't have some NPC names, because these days, a modern DM doesn't have all the same free time that a DM in the 70s might have had. We have the internet now, and streaming TV. We have to watch the latest Star Wars thing while we check Instagram to feel bad about our lives, and watch TikToks of teenagers discovering decades-old trends, and then go on Twitter and debunk racist lies spread by the Republican candidate for president and vice president. We've got a lot of stuff going on. However, I'm also fascinated by the fact that this adventure is being published in 3 booklets. If I recall correctly, the 4th edition published adventures often came in multiple booklets. Now, I own a couple of these, but I actually haven't played through them. I haven't even read them all the way through, so I don't know how intuitive they were divided up. I don't know if they were separated out in a way that made sense. So I'm going to be really curious how the divisions work this time around. Side note, the first adventure published for 4th edition was called Keep on the Shadowfell, as a reference to Keep on the Borderlands. It wasn't the same keep, though, and it wasn't a starter set adventure, and it also wasn't very good, but I still think that connection is neat, and I didn't know where else to bring it up in this video. But I like the idea of dividing this adventure up into 3 booklets, specifically these 3 booklets. This division sounds pretty good to me. When your characters are in the keep, you can bust out the booklet for the keep and just reference that. Once they go into the wilderness, you can grab an easy-to-handle booklet covering wilderness travel. And then you reach the caves, and boom, you've got a booklet just for the Caves of Chaos. I'm going to be very interested to see how that feels at the table, but right now that sounds really interesting, and I would love to give that a shot. But the other reason these divisions are so interesting to me is that each booklet kind of represents a different pillar of gameplay. When the characters are in the keep, they're going to be doing a lot of role-playing and maybe some downtime activities. Going into the wilderness brings them into the exploration pillar. And then, of course, the network of tunnels full of monsters would contain more dungeon crawling and combat. Now, this doesn't mean that every booklet is dedicated only to one pillar of the game. That's not how it works. There will obviously be combat as the characters deal with random encounters in the wilderness, and a dungeon crawl does contain a lot of exploration and role-playing. But still, if there's any chance that the wilderness booklet could contain more cohesive and coherent rules for dealing with the wilderness travel and random encounters than we've gotten in the 2014 game, then I'll be a very happy camper. Although, once again, if this does contain the sort of rules that I'm talking about, and it might not, but if it does, and it actually offers a convenient way to handle wilderness travel and random encounters, then it actually still would be really weird that we're not getting that right around the release of the core rulebooks. But again, I've said my piece on that one, so we'll move on. Next in the video, they talk about how they're going to continue to build a relationship with local gaming stores by releasing books 2 weeks early. And that's great, I love that they're doing that. I was able to get my hands on the Player's Handbook early because of this relationship with gaming stores. Because my policy is to only buy my Wizards of the Coast books from local gaming stores to make sure that if I do give money to a huge soulless corporation, I also want to help a small business. Although I actually only got mine 1 week before the wide release, and even though I did visit a store 2 weeks early, the books with all the standard covers had been sold out, and all that was left were variant covers. God gives his hardest battles to his toughest warriors. But then they ordered more copies, so I was able to get one a week later. Also, because I have a policy to always pick up another RPG book from a smaller publisher whenever I buy a Wizards of the Coast book, because again, I want to help support smaller businesses. If I'm going to give money to WotC, I should really also give money to somebody else too. So I bought the Hellboy RPG. I am so excited to read and play this game, especially because my game style already has a lot in common with the Hellboy comics, and particularly the first Hellboy movie. A big scary monster is doing big scary things, and the heroes come and beat the shit out of it. So, this could be awesome. This could be perfect for me. Anyway, in this D&D video, remember that's what we were talking about a minute ago? They talk about how picking up a book at a local gaming store will also give you the opportunity to play in an adventure in the store. And I'm very excited to learn more about that. Then they announced some secret Lair drops. It seems like that has something to do with Magic the Gathering cards based on D&D. I don't really know anything about Magic, so I hope these cards are good, but I can't really address that in any meaningful way. But then they announced the LEGO Minifigs, which are coming out on September 1st, which is obviously past by now. And this is the kind of thing that I just made a whole video talking about how D&D didn't really do until the last couple of years. This is a great way to get the D&D brand in front of normies. My wife has been trying to figure out how to fill the hours during maternity leave so she doesn't go crazy, especially now that she's been laid off and her time at home has been extended a little bit. So she's been dipping her toe into the world of LEGO. Now, she doesn't keep up with D&D news. She didn't watch this video. She has no idea this announcement was coming out or was tied to the 50th anniversary of D&D or anything like that. But a week or two ago, she was just browsing through Instagram and her algorithm showed her the D&D LEGO Minifigs. And my wife, who has played only a little bit of D&D and still might play from time to time, but is generally not super interested in this hobby, she showed me the minifigs and she said, "Hey, these D&D LEGO figures are cute." And if you know my wife, you know that's code for, I would be interested in getting these. And that's what Wizards of the Coast wants. They want people to pick up their tie-in products and build positive associations with the brand. This is exactly the kind of thing that D&D should have been doing for the past 20 years. It's kind of bizarre that they're really only just now getting around to the kind of brand synergy that actually makes sense. You could take these figs and put them in your game and use them as miniatures if you wanted. Or you could just build a LEGO D&D set with them. Or you could buy these minifigs and play with them because you like to play with Legos, especially if you're a kid. But either way, this gets the brand in front of more people and builds positive associations with it. It's a no-brainer, and it's kind of wild it took this long. They also announced some more third-party publishers who are going to put D&D 5e compatible products on D&D Beyond. I don't really have a ton to say about this, except for the fact that I do think it's cool that they are definitely putting more Kobold Press and MCDM books on their platform. On the one hand, that's not terribly surprising. Both of those publishers have put out some of the most well-regarded 5e supplements of the past 10 years. They belong on this list just as much as any of these other publishers. All these companies put out great stuff. But Kobold Press and MCDM are also working on their own heroic fantasy RPGs. I mean, Kobold Press's Tales of the Valiant is literally just their own version of 5th edition. So, you know, it really wouldn't surprise anybody if WotC didn't have a friendly relationship with either of these companies. but the fact that they're putting more books from these publishers on D&D Beyond is a good sign. Sure, they're working on competing games, but someone at WotC still understood that these products are valuable to the D&D audience. And so I think it'll be very interesting to see which other third-party products wind up on D&D Beyond. Of course, if you're looking for some terrific third-party material you could drop into your D&D games, you should check out today's sponsor, the Kickstarter for the SIDEQUEST Year 3 Annual. SIDEQUEST is Icarus Games' incredible monthly zine that presents fantastic 5e content that you can use in your games whether you're a GM or a player. And the Year 3 Annual combines issues 25 to 36 in print for the first time, in just some cheap paperback. I think they went to Staples or something. Oh, no, wait, hold on, that's right. The SIDEQUEST Annuals come in gorgeous hardcover books that just feel amazing to flip through. And also, they're full of amazing content. Do you want cool locations you can plug into your game? Do you want player options like the Ranger Conclave of the Dread Hunt? Do you want cool factions for your party to deal with, either by joining up with them or by fighting them? Do you want a dozen iconic NPCs for your party to fall in love with? Do you want world-building articles about developing your setting, or about pricing magic items? Do you want more than 30 new magic items? It's also spooky season. Do you want more than 20 new monsters? Do you want advice about how to include deals with the devil in your game? That's spooky too. And you can find all of that and so much more in the SIDEQUEST Year 3 Annual. They've passed their funding goal and there's still a couple weeks left in the campaign, so check out the link in the description, back the Kickstarter, and elevate your 5e game with the best the SIDEQUEST zine has to offer. Thanks so much to Icarus Games and the SIDEQUEST Year 3 Annual for sponsoring this video. So at this point in the D&D Presents video, we get the announcement that I really wanted to talk about, the reason I made this video at all.
Part of our reimagining of D&D's core books was us also wanting to return to D&D's most popular setting, the Forgotten Realms.
We are super excited about the Forgotten Realms guide. There hasn't been a player's guide in 5th edition.
Okay, first of all, saying there's never been a player's guide for the Forgotten Realms for 5th edition, and then cutting to a shot that includes the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide and a pile of books, is the funniest thing I've seen from Wizards of the Coast in years. Are we led to believe that one of the thinnest hardcover products produced for 5e was not intended for players, but was instead a GM resource? Why did you put Adventurer's Guide in the title if it wasn't for players? Very silly. But zooming out, this pretty much confirms what I had suspected was going to happen. The Forgotten Realms will not be the default campaign setting for D&D 2024 anymore. Like I said before, we know the Dungeon Master's Guide is going to include a section about the world of Greyhawk, so it seems like that is going to be the new default setting for D&D. And so now if the publishers want you to play in the Forgotten Realms, which they obviously do, it's a very popular setting, then they're going to have to publish specific Forgotten Realms handbooks. And you know, I can't help but think back to a video I made a couple of years ago talking about how the Forgotten Realms was a really bad choice for a default setting because it was too dense and complex for new players and game masters. My feeling was that if people want to run their games in the realms, they should have the option to opt into it. That way they basically know what they're getting themselves into. And to help make that a possibility, the realms should be in their own products, rather than being the default setting. That way, new game masters aren't automatically running their adventures in the realms when they don't necessarily know anything about the setting. Because when you're still learning how to play the game and you're getting ready to DM for the first time, the last thing you want is for your players to bust out a bunch of trivia and lore about the setting when all you know about the realms is what's on the map that was included in the Lost Mine of Phandelver starter set. To this day, I believe that that is one of my most disliked videos because a whole bunch of people thought that I was saying the Forgotten Realms is a bad setting, and that was not my point. I mean, I don't really like the setting personally, but my main point was that it's not a good choice for a default setting. In other words, this announcement is exactly what I wanted. In fact, this actually goes further than even I could have imagined.
It's too much to fit into one book. So our return to the realms is going to be in 2 books. One tailor-made for dungeon masters, and the other a book that is tailor-made for players, but also of use to our DMs.
Here's what I really like about this announcement. First, having a DM-specific books helps establish a baseline about what's reasonable for a game master to know about the setting before they run their first game in the Forgotten Realms. And that's ultimately the point of any campaign setting book, to get you all the information you need to run a game in the setting, but not to overload you with too much detail or stuff that won't be useful. But second, we're getting a player-centric product for the realms as well. And this is great because it means players can also find themselves on an equal playing field with each other, at least as much as is possible with the Forgotten Realms. Because at a certain point, every official campaign setting is going to have some lore that old school or longtime players will know more about than someone who is new to the game. That's going to be true for Greyhawk, it's true for Ravenloft, it might even be true about Eberron, but I think it's at its worst with the Forgotten Realms, because that is the only setting where D&D has been continuously publishing novels set in the realms for decades. So a player-centric Forgotten Realms book helps establish what should be considered canon, or even just what's considered essential knowledge, that would help new players get caught up and help longtime fans focus their attention toward only the parts of the Forgotten Realms that D&D 5e wants to incorporate and put front and center. Additionally, the hope is that this book will use its subclasses and spells and other player-facing features to help those players feel like they can create characters who are unique to the Forgotten Realms, and that can help highlight the aspects of the realms that are unlike any other D&D setting, making it stand out a little bit more and feel more distinctive.
So we start the new player options. Lots of great, crunchy stuff for players to dig into to make new characters. New subclasses, new feats, new backgrounds, new spells, new kinds of spells. And then a chapter on factions that player characters can belong to. A lot of these will be factions that you'll recognize, like the Harpers or the Red Wizards of Thay, and maybe a couple of new ones that maybe got promoted.
And of course, financially, books that have more options for players sell a lot more copies than books targeting game masters. But this approach also feels like a course correction from the products like the Spelljammer box set. The Spelljammer set had a book that was specifically meant for players. It had the new races and backgrounds and some other rules that players could use. However, if you wanted to get your hands on it, you had to purchase the entire 3-book box set. And that meant that you also had all the monsters in the Spelljammer starting adventure when all you wanted were the races and backgrounds. And of course, that's to say nothing of the fact that a 3-book box set would be a lot more expensive than most players are prepared to pay to get what essentially amounted to just a couple of additional player options. But if you can sell the player-centric book as its own product, then hopefully it'll be worth it for them to buy that book. After all, Tasha's Cauldron of Everything and Xanathar's Guide to Everything had some resources for GMs, but I would imagine those books sold extraordinarily well, specifically because they were meant for players to pick them up, and they had a lot of player options so players wouldn't feel like that book was too expensive to be worth the purchase. Of course, that's still the big question, right? We'll have to wait and see if these books are actually good. I haven't had a chance to review that many campaign-setting books on my channel yet, but I can tell you that they tend to vary wildly in quality. I really enjoy Mythic Odysseys of Theros, despite a fundamental problem that we'll talk about whenever we cover that book. I've heard amazing things about Eberron, despite not having read it myself yet. But I know some people weren't blown away by Spelljammer or Dragonlance, at least the 5th edition releases of those. And of course, the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide was also meant to be a dedicated Forgotten Realms supplement, but that really was not a very useful product at the table. So I hope they stick the landing with these Forgotten Realms books. But conceptually, I think this is a really smart decision if they can deliver on what they're promising. And then the final 5 minutes or so of this video are all about Project Sigil, which is Wizards of the Coast's big, flashy, 3D virtual tabletop. Now, I have to be honest, this is the part of the announcement that I'm basically the least excited about. I've heard people who use it say that it was fun to use, but I'm not really looking for another way to spend my prep time that involves this much level of detailed prep. I am so much happier just to grab a map and throw it in my virtual tabletop of choice. I'll spend a little time making sure that it's about the right size and then quickly adding the monsters that I'll need, but I don't really have the free time to sit and build a virtual fortress. Even if I wasn't somebody with a full-time job making super long videos every week and helping take care of a baby who'll be 6 months old on Monday, this kind of thing was never how I want to spend my time prepping for a D&D game. I would still be interested to give it a try at some point and see what it's like to run a one-shot, but honestly, the most exciting part is the pre-written adventure they're offering.
We have an idea that's called a module. It's a D&D mini adventure meant to last a few hours just so that you can get a taste or get a part of your adventure. We didn't want to tell the whole story for you, so we give you these places. You want to go to a graveyard? Well, here's a graveyard. You want to go to a mine? You want to go to town? You can then assemble them how you want, but each has a pre-made story in it, characters, adventures, and so it's a great place to start. You're modding games more than making everything whole cloth, which is just faster and more fun for most people.
Like I said earlier, I used to homebrew all of my adventures, but these days I'm really looking for pre-written adventures that are easy to assemble into a campaign. So speaking personally, I'm a lot more likely to use Project Sigil for my games if they offer pre-made scenes for their published adventures. If I can download Castle Ravenloft and drop it into my games, then hell yeah, I'll try using Project Sigil to run Curse of Strahd. Until then, without the ability to easily load sequences from published adventures into the program, putting together a dungeon from an adventure that I want to run is more trouble than it's worth for how I prefer to spend my prep time. Of course, right now it's kind of a moot point. I don't even have a computer that could run Project Sigil, but I do know they want to branch out to other devices, and at some point down the road I actually do want to get a gaming PC. Probably something pretty simple, if that's even a thing for gaming PCs, I genuinely don't know. But the point is, I'm curious to see what happens with Project Sigil, but I'm also very aware this one just might not be for me, depending on what they wind up doing with the pre-rendered scenes. And that's it. That is everything that was announced for D&D Direct 2024. Overall, I'm optimistic about the products that we've heard about so far. But I'd like to hear from you. What did you think of these announcements? Is there anything in particular here that you're looking forward to? Is there anything here that you're worried about? Is there anything here that you disagree with me about? Anything that I'm excited about that you think we shouldn't be? Let me know in the comments below. Make sure to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell to catch my videos as soon as they drop. Tomorrow I have a video coming out that I've wanted to make for literally years. It's a Critical Role video discussing a very important topic. It's going to be a pretty long video and kind of a heavy video because we have something kind of important to talk about. But also sometimes I put out bonus videos, and the best way to find out about those is to subscribe to the channel and ring the bell. This is my second bonus video of the week, and if you're very good, you might get another bonus video on Friday. Also depends how things go for me. It's been a busy week, as I'm sure you can tell. But that's all the more reason to subscribe and ring the bell, so you don't have to guess. You can just find out when I post videos even if they're surprises by seeing the notifications. And if you want to help support this channel financially, consider joining my Patreon or becoming a YouTube member. You can join my Discord server to hang out with other awesome people, and sign up for my newsletter to catch some cool updates that I've got coming out very soon. Make sure you're registered to vote, because it's going to be pretty important this year. And all those links are in the doobly-doo below. If you missed my video about why I don't buy alternate D&D covers and why it was such a struggle to me that those were the only things available for the Player's Handbook at the local gaming store, check this video out right here. Until next time, play fair, and have fun.